She approached him with desperation in her eyes and a request that would change everything. Her name was Nicole Harper, and she had just made the most reckless decision of her 25 years by walking up to a stranger in an expensive suit and asking him to kiss her. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known as the words tumbled from her trembling lips, was that the man she had chosen was Daniel Cross, a figure whose name commanded fear in every dark corner of the city. She wanted to make her ex-boyfriend jealous, to salvage her pride after a humiliating public breakup. But the moment Daniel's cold blue eyes fixed on her with calculating interest, the moment his hand reached up to cup her jaw with possessive certainty, Nicole's simple plan to reclaim her dignity became something far more dangerous. She had asked a predator for a favor, and predators always collect payment. What began as a desperate performance in a crowded restaurant would bind her to a man who never did anything without purpose, who never touched anything he didn't intend to keep. Nicole Harper had just traded one heartbreak for a far more complex entanglement, and there would be no walking away unscathed. Nicole Harper's life had been unremarkable in the most comfortable way until 3 months ago. She worked as a graphic designer for a mid-sized marketing firm in downtown Sterling Heights, creating advertisements and brand materials for clients she would never meet. The work was steady, if uninspiring, the pay adequate for a decent apartment in a safe neighborhood, and occasional weekend trips with friends. She was pretty in an accessible way, with honey blonde hair that fell in natural waves, warm brown eyes, and a slender frame that she maintained through yoga classes she attended sporadically. Her style was carefully curated casual, designer jeans paired with vintage finds, understated jewelry, the aesthetic of someone who wanted to appear effortlessly put together. She had dated casually through college and her early 20s, nothing serious until she met Ryan Mitchell at a mutual friend's birthday party 18 months ago. Ryan was everything she thought she wanted, charming and ambitious, working his way up in commercial real estate with the kind of confidence that seemed attractive until it revealed itself as arrogance. They fell into a relationship that felt comfortable, predictable dinner dates at trendy restaurants, weekend brunches with their coupled friends, social media posts that projected the image of a perfect partnership. Nicole convinced herself she was happy, that this steady progression toward an expected future was what love looked like when you grew up and got practical. But 3 months ago, at a crowded industry mixer she had attended to support Ryan's networking, everything shattered. She had stepped away to take a phone call from her mother, and when she returned, she found Ryan in a corner booth with his arm around another woman, kissing her with an intensity he hadn't shown Nicole in months. The confrontation that followed was ugly and public, Ryan dismissive and cruel, claiming he had been planning to end things anyway, that Nicole was too passive, too ordinary, that he needed someone with more fire. The humiliation had been crushing, made worse by the fact that half their social circle had witnessed it, that the stories spread through mutual friends with the speed of wildfire. Nicole had retreated into herself, spending weeks oscillating between grief and rage, deleting photos and blocking numbers, trying to rebuild her shattered sense of self-worth. Her friends offered sympathy and wine-fueled evenings of ex-bashing, but nothing eased the sting of being discarded so publicly, so casually. Then came the text message that reignited everything. Ryan had messaged her 2 days ago, his tone casual and infuriatingly presumptuous, asking if she wanted to grab coffee and talk. As if their relationship had ended amicably, as if he hadn't humiliated her in front of people whose respect she valued. Nicole had stared at that message for hours, anger building with each reading. She didn't want him back. She was certain of that. But she wanted him to regret what he had done. She wanted to prove she wasn't the passive, ordinary girl he had dismissed. She wanted to show him she had moved on to something better, something he couldn't touch. That desire for vindication led her to accept when her friend Jessica mentioned that Ryan would be at Marcello's, an upscale Italian restaurant in the heart of the city's business district, for a client dinner on Friday night. Jessica had suggested Nicole show up looking amazing, make him see what he was missing. But Nicole's plan had evolved into something more dramatic, more reckless. She would go to Marcello's, and she would make sure Ryan saw her with someone who made him look insignificant by comparison. She would create a scene that would haunt him the way his betrayal haunted her. It was immature and petty, and completely unlike her usual measured approach to conflict, but the need to reclaim her power overrode every cautious instinct. Friday evening arrived with Nicole's nerves stretched taut as piano wire. She had dressed with meticulous care, wearing a black cocktail dress that hugged her curves perfectly. Her hair swept into an elegant updo, makeup applied with more precision than she typically bothered with. She arrived at Marcello's at exactly 8:30, the reservation made under a fake name, her hands trembling as she walked through the heavy wooden doors into the restaurant's warm amber lighting and quiet sophistication. The dining room was elegant and understated, white tablecloths and crystal glasses, the murmur of wealth and business conducted over expensive wine. Nicole scanned the room and found Ryan immediately, seated at a table near the back with 3 other people, his posture relaxed and confident, completely unaware of her presence. Her heart hammered against her ribs, fear and determination warring in her chest. She needed to find someone, anyone who could help her execute this ridiculous plan, and that's when she saw him. He sat alone at a corner table, positioned with his back to the wall in a way that gave him a clear view of the entire restaurant, a positioning that suggested either paranoia or tactical awareness. He was perhaps in his mid-30s, devastatingly handsome in a way that felt dangerous rather than safe, with dark hair perfectly styled, sharp features that could have been carved from marble, and pale blue eyes that seemed to miss nothing as they swept the room with cold assessment. He wore a charcoal suit that was clearly custom-tailored, every line perfect, and he radiated an aura of controlled power that made other diners instinctively avoid his space. A single glass of red wine sat before him, barely touched, and he appeared to be waiting for someone. Nicole's rational mind screamed warnings, cataloging all the reasons approaching this man was a terrible idea. But her need for vindication, for the dramatic gesture that would shatter Ryan's indifference, overrode every cautious thought. She walked toward the stranger's table before she could talk herself out of it, her heels clicking on the polished floor, her pulse racing so fast she felt lightheaded. The man noticed her approach when she was still several feet away, his pale eyes lifting from his wine to fix on her with the kind of attention that felt like being pinned beneath a microscope. Nicole stopped beside his table, her rehearsed words evaporating under the intensity of that stare. "Excuse me," she managed, her voice shakier than she wanted. "I know this is crazy, but I need to ask you for a huge favor." The man set down his wineglass with deliberate precision, his expression revealing nothing. His silence was more unnerving than any response would have been. Nicole forced herself to continue, the words tumbling out in a rushed confession. "My ex-boyfriend is here, in this restaurant, and he humiliated me 3 months ago in front of everyone we know. I just need him to think I've moved on, that I'm with someone he could never compete with. I know it's insane to ask a complete stranger, but would you be willing to pretend to be my date? Just for a few minutes? Just long enough for him to see?" The request hung in the air between them, absurd and desperate. The man studied her for a long moment, his pale eyes moving over her face with an assessment that felt clinical, searching for something beneath her carefully applied makeup and forced confidence. When he finally spoke, his voice was deep and smooth, carrying an accent she couldn't quite place, something European buried beneath cultured American English. "You want to use me to make another man jealous? That's your request?" Nicole nodded, feeling her cheeks flush with embarrassment. I know it sounds pathetic. I just need him to think I'm fine, that I'm better than fine. The man's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile, something cold and calculating. And what makes you think I would agree to involve myself in your petty relationship drama? Because you look like someone who understands power, Nicole said, the words emerging from some desperate place of honesty. And this is about power, about not letting him think he won, that he broke me. The man's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a flicker of interest in those cold eyes. He leaned back in his chair, considering her with renewed attention. What exactly did you have in mind? Just sit with me for a few minutes, Nicole said, encouraged by his question. Let him see us together. Maybe act like we're on a date. That's all. The man was quiet for another long moment. Then he gestured to the empty chair across from him. Sit. Nicole sat quickly, relief flooding through her even as a new wave of nervousness took hold. Up close, the man was even more imposing, his presence filling the space between them with an intensity that made the air feel thicker. Thank you, Nicole breathed. Really, thank you so much. I'm Nicole, by the way. Nicole Harper. Daniel, he said, not offering a last name. And before we continue this charade, Nicole Harper, you should understand something. I don't do favors without compensation. What exactly do you think you can offer me in return for this performance? The question sent a chill down Nicole's spine. She hadn't thought that far ahead, hadn't considered what a stranger might want from her. I could pay you, she offered weakly. Whatever you think is fair. Daniel's smile widened slightly, and it was not a comforting expression. I don't need your money, but perhaps we can negotiate terms. You want me to play the role of your new lover, to make your ex-boyfriend suffer the indignity of seeing you with someone superior. Very well. But if we're going to do this, we do it properly, not half measures. Nicole's throat went dry. What does that mean? It means, Daniel said, his pale eyes holding hers with uncomfortable intensity, that if your ex-boyfriend is going to believe you've moved on, he needs to see something that cuts deep. He needs to see you completely consumed by someone else, claimed in a way that leaves no doubt. He leaned forward slightly, and Nicole caught the scent of his cologne, something expensive and woodsy that made her pulse quicken. It means you're going to ask me to kiss you, Nicole. Right here, right now, where your ex-boyfriend can see. And I'm going to kiss you like you belong to me. And in return for this favor, you're going to owe me something we'll discuss later. The proposition hung between them, far more than Nicole had bargained for. She had wanted a simple performance, a few minutes of pretend intimacy, but Daniel was offering something that felt genuinely dangerous, a kiss that wouldn't be performance, but possession. Her eyes darted to Ryan's table, finding him laughing at something one of his companions had said, completely oblivious to her presence, completely comfortable in his assumption that she was still at home nursing her broken heart. The sight of his casual happiness ignited something fierce in her chest. Yes, Nicole said, meeting Daniel's gaze with newfound determination. Ask me. Daniel's smile was slow and predatory. Then ask properly, Nicole. Make it convincing. Nicole took a breath, feeling like she was stepping off a cliff. Can you kiss me? She said, her voice stronger now, carrying just enough volume that nearby tables might overhear. I want to make my ex-boyfriend jealous. I want him to see that I've moved on to someone he could never be. Daniel's hand rose slowly, his fingers cupping her jaw with a possessiveness that sent electricity down her spine. His thumb brushed her cheek, the touch gentle but claiming. Oh, Nicole, he said, his voice dropping to something intimate and dangerous. By the time I'm done, he won't just be jealous. He'll understand exactly what he lost and exactly who owns you now. Then Daniel leaned across the table and kissed her. It wasn't the staged performance Nicole had imagined, wasn't the brief press of lips that could be dismissed as acting. Daniel kissed her like he meant it, his mouth claiming hers with confident possession, his hand sliding from her jaw to the back of her neck, holding her in place while he thoroughly explored her mouth. Nicole's brain short-circuited, every planned thought evaporating under the onslaught of sensation. She kissed him back without thinking, her hands coming up to grip the edge of the table for balance, her body responding to his dominance with a heat that had nothing to do with performance. Time seemed to suspend, the restaurant fading away until there was only the pressure of his lips, the controlled strength in his hand, the way he kissed her like he was staking a claim that extended far beyond this moment. When he finally pulled back, Nicole was breathless, her carefully applied lipstick smeared, her pulse racing for reasons that had nothing to do with her ex-boyfriend. Daniel's thumb traced her bottom lip, his pale eyes dark with something that made her shiver. "Perfect," he murmured. "Now look at him." Nicole turned her head, following Daniel's subtle nod, and found Ryan staring at their table with an expression of complete shock. He had frozen mid-conversation, his wine glass suspended halfway to his mouth, his eyes wide with disbelief, and something that looked unmistakably like wounded pride. Their eyes met across the crowded restaurant, and Nicole felt a savage satisfaction at the recognition in his face, the dawning realization that she wasn't the broken, passive girl he had left behind. Daniel's hand moved to her shoulder, a casual, possessive gesture that Ryan couldn't miss. "Wave to him," Daniel instructed quietly. "Let him know you see him." Nicole raised her hand in a small wave, her smile bright and genuine for the first time. "In months?" Ryan's face flushed dark red, and he looked away quickly, his body language radiating discomfort and anger. "Mission accomplished," Daniel said, his hand sliding down her arm before releasing her entirely. "Your ex-boyfriend is now thoroughly aware that you've upgraded significantly." Nicole turned back to Daniel, adrenaline still flooding her system, her lips still tingling from the kiss. "Thank you," she said, meaning it despite the confusion swirling through her. That was perfect. Daniel picked up his wine glass, his expression returning to that cold neutrality. "Now we discuss payment." Nicole's satisfaction dimmed, replaced by nervous apprehension. "What do you want?" "Have dinner with me tomorrow night?" Daniel said simply. "A real dinner. Not this performance. I want to know who you are beyond the desperate woman willing to kiss strangers to wound her ex." Nicole blinked, thrown by the request. "That's it? Just dinner?" "For now," Daniel replied, and something in his tone suggested there would be more later. "Give me your phone." Nicole handed it over automatically, watching as Daniel input his number and sent himself a text. "I'll pick you up at 7, he said, returning her phone. "Dress well. We're going somewhere that requires it." "And Nicole," he added, his pale eyes holding hers with intensity that stole her breath, "don't mistake what just happened for a game. I don't play games. I make investments. And I always collect on my investments." Before Nicole could respond, before she could process the implication of his words, Daniel stood and dropped several bills on the table, far more than his wine had cost. He nodded once, a gesture of dismissal, and walked away, moving through the restaurant with the confidence of someone accustomed to commanding space. Nicole sat frozen at the table he had vacated, her heart still racing, her mind struggling to catch up with what had just happened. She had gotten what she wanted, had wounded Ryan's pride and proven she could move on. But in doing so, she had bound herself to a man who radiated danger, who kissed like he owned her, who spoke of investments and payment with the certainty of someone who always got what he wanted. She glanced back at Ryan's table and found him watching her with poorly concealed anger and confusion. The vindication she had sought felt hollow now, overshadowed by the knowledge that she had just made a deal whose full price she didn't yet understand. Nicole gathered her things and left the restaurant on shaking legs, Daniel's number burning in her phone like a brand. The memory of his kiss seared into her consciousness. She had wanted to reclaim her power, to prove she wasn't the passive, ordinary girl Ryan had dismissed. But somewhere between walking up to a stranger and feeling his lips claim hers, Nicole had stopped being the woman who played it safe and became someone who made reckless bargains with dangerous men. And the most terrifying part was the flutter of anticipation in her chest when she thought about tomorrow night's dinner, about seeing Daniel cross again, about discovering what he really wanted from her. The girl who had entered Marcello's seeking petty revenge had left bound to something far more consuming, and there was no pretending she hadn't chosen it herself. She had asked him to kiss her, and he had answered with possession. Now she would discover exactly what that possession meant, and whether she had the courage to walk away or the recklessness to surrender completely. Nicole spent Saturday in a state of anxious anticipation that bordered on panic. She researched Daniel Cross obsessively, typing his name into search engines and finding very little concrete information. There were mentions in business journals, brief references to property development and investment firms, photos from charity galas showing him in expensive suits beside politicians and businessmen, always on the periphery, never the focus. What struck her most was how carefully he seemed to avoid attention, how deliberately he stayed in the shadows despite obvious wealth and influence. The lack of information was more unsettling than any scandal would have been, suggesting someone who had the power to control his public image with precision. By late afternoon, Nicole had worked herself into a state of near paralysis, simultaneously wanting to cancel and desperate to see him again. She tried on 6 different outfits before settling on a deep emerald dress that was elegant without being too formal, her hands shaking as she applied makeup and styled her hair. At exactly 7 o'clock, her doorbell rang. Nicole opened it to find Daniel standing in her hallway, impossibly handsome in a navy suit, his pale eyes sweeping over her with an assessment that felt both appreciative and possessive. "You look beautiful," he said simply, offering his arm. "The car is waiting." Nicole locked her apartment with trembling fingers and allowed Daniel to guide her downstairs to a sleek black sedan that screamed money and power. A driver held the door, and Daniel settled beside her in the back seat, maintaining a careful distance that somehow felt more intimate than touching. They drove in silence through the city, leaving the familiar downtown behind and heading into the exclusive Riverside district where old money lived behind gates and carefully maintained privacy. The restaurant was called Bellevue, a name Nicole recognized from magazine articles about places where reservations required weeks of advance notice and connections most people didn't have. Inside, they were greeted by a maitre d' who recognized Daniel immediately, leading them to a private corner table without asking for a name or reservation. The meal unfolded with a surreal quality, courses appearing and disappearing with perfect timing, wine selected by Daniel without consulting a menu. But Nicole barely tasted the food, her attention consumed by the man across from her, by the conversation that felt like a careful dance of revelation and concealment. Daniel asked questions about her life, her work, her family, with a focus that suggested genuine interest rather than polite small talk. Nicole found herself talking more than she intended, sharing details about her childhood in a small town upstate, her practical decision to pursue graphic design, her complicated relationship with parents who loved her but didn't quite understand her. And slowly, carefully, Daniel revealed pieces of himself in return, though Nicole noticed he controlled the flow of information with precision, offering enough to seem open while revealing very little of substance. What Nicole did learn was that Daniel had built his fortune through careful investment and an understanding of human nature that bordered on predatory. He spoke about business the way other people spoke about chess, seeing patterns and opportunities invisible to others, making moves that positioned him 3 steps ahead of competition. There was something both fascinating and frightening about his worldview, a cold pragmatism that acknowledged the darkness in human behavior and used it strategically. As dessert arrived, Daniel leaned back in his chair, studying her with that unsettling intensity. "You're wondering why I agreed to help you last night," he said. Not a question, but a statement. Nicole nodded, setting down her fork. "The thought has crossed my mind. You could have told me to leave, could have ignored a desperate stranger making an absurd request. Instead, you kissed me like you meant it and demanded payment in the form of dinner. Why?" Daniel's smile was slight and dangerous. "Because you interested me, Nicole. Not because of your beauty, though you are beautiful. Not because of your obvious desperation, though that was compelling in its honesty. You interested me because you approached me, a complete stranger, and asked me to help you hurt someone. That takes a particular kind of courage or recklessness. I wanted to know which." "And what's your conclusion?" Nicole asked, her heart racing despite her attempt at composure. Daniel reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb tracing her knuckles with deliberate slowness. "I think you're both courageous and reckless, Nicole. I think you've spent your life playing it safe, being the good girl who follows the rules and accepts the limits others place on her. But underneath that careful exterior is something hungry, something that wants more than the ordinary existence you've settled for. Last night, you let that hunger make a decision, and now you're terrified because you don't know how to reconcile who you've been with who you want to become." The accuracy of his assessment hit Nicole like a physical blow. She stared at him, feeling exposed and understood in a way that should have been comforting but felt dangerous. "You don't know me," she said weakly. "Don't I?" Daniel's grip on her hand tightened slightly. "I know you're here, Nicole. Despite every rational instinct telling you to run, despite knowing nothing about me beyond the danger I represent, you're here. That tells me everything I need to know about what you really want." "What do I want?" Nicole whispered, the question as much for herself as for him. Daniel's pale eyes held hers, and when he spoke, his voice carried absolute certainty. "You want someone to see you, really see you, and choose you anyway. You want to feel alive, to experience intensity and passion instead of the comfortable mediocrity you've been accepting. You want permission to be reckless, to make choices that don't fit the safe narrative you've constructed. And most of all," he leaned closer, his voice dropping to something intimate and commanding, "you want someone strong enough to handle all of you, the light and the dark, without flinching or trying to make you smaller." The truth of his words resonated through Nicole's entire being. She wanted to deny it, to retreat into the safety of her constructed identity. But sitting across from Daniel Cross, her hand in his, she couldn't lie to herself anymore. "Yes," she breathed. "God help me. Yes." Daniel's smile was triumphant and possessive. "Then stop fighting what's happening between us, Nicole. Stop pretending this is about your ex-boyfriend or a moment of reckless revenge. This is about you choosing something real, something dangerous, something that will change you in ways you can't predict." He released her hand and signaled for the check. "I'm taking you home now because if I don't, I'm going to take you somewhere else entirely, and you're not ready for that yet. But understand this clearly. I don't do casual, Nicole. If you see me again, if you answer when I call, you're choosing me and everything that entails." The intensity of the ultimatum should have sent Nicole running. Instead, she felt a thrill of anticipation mixed with fear. "What does everything entail exactly?" she asked. Daniel stood and offered his hand, pulling her to her feet. "That's what you'll discover if you're brave enough to find out." The drive back to Nicole's apartment was silent, tension humming between them like a live wire. When they arrived, Daniel walked her to her door, his hand a constant warm pressure at the small of her back. Nicole unlocked her door and turned to face him, uncertain what came next, what she was supposed to say or do. Daniel cupped her face in both hands, the gesture achingly gentle despite the command in his eyes. "I'm going to kiss you again, Nicole. Not for show, not to make anyone jealous. Just because I want to, because you're mine now, whether you're ready to admit it or not. And this time, when I walk away, you're going to spend the night thinking about me, about what you want, about whether you're strong enough to take it." Then he kissed her, slower this time but no less possessive, his mouth moving over hers with devastating thoroughness, claiming and exploring until Nicole forgot how to breathe. Forgot everything except the taste of him and the feel of his hands holding her like something precious and dangerous at once. When he finally released her, Nicole sagged against her doorframe, her legs weak, her entire body humming with want. "Good night, Nicole," Daniel said, his voice rough with barely controlled desire. "I'll be in touch." Then he was gone, leaving Nicole standing in her doorway, her lips swollen, her heart racing, her carefully constructed life crumbling around the truth she could no longer deny. She had asked a stranger to kiss her to make her ex-boyfriend jealous, and instead, she had found something that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. She had found a man who saw through every defense, who challenged every safe choice, who offered her intensity and danger, wrapped in expensive suits and devastating kisses. The question was whether she had the courage to reach for what she wanted, knowing it would cost her the comfortable safety she had always relied on. Nicole closed her door and leaned against it, Daniel's words echoing through her mind. "You're mine now." The claim should have angered her, should have triggered every independent instinct. Instead, it sent warmth flooding through her chest, a recognition of something she hadn't known she was seeking. She was falling for him, for the dangerous man who had agreed to a stranger's desperate request and turned it into something real and consuming. And the most terrifying part was that she wanted to fall, wanted to see where this dangerous attraction would lead, wanted to discover who she could become in the hands of someone who saw her hunger and matched it with his own. 3 days passed with no word from Daniel, 3 days during which Nicole oscillated between relief and disappointment, convincing herself she had dodged a bullet only to feel the sharp sting of abandonment. She threw herself into work, accepting overtime projects that kept her mind occupied and her hands busy. She ignored texts from Jessica asking about the restaurant incident, not ready to explain what had happened or what it meant. Ryan had tried calling twice, his messages demanding and confused, asking who the guy at Marcello's was, insisting they needed to talk. Nicole deleted them without responding, finding she felt nothing when she saw his name, no residual hurt or satisfaction, just indifference. Whatever power Ryan had held over her had evaporated the moment Daniel's lips touched hers. On Wednesday evening, as Nicole was finishing a client presentation, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. The text was brief and commanding. "Rooftop bar at the Morrison Hotel. 9 tonight. Wear something that makes you feel powerful." Daniel didn't ask if she was free, didn't request her presence. He simply expected her compliance, and Nicole found that confidence both infuriating and irresistible. She left work early, going home to change into a red dress she had bought on impulse and never worn, something bolder than her usual style, something that made her feel dangerous. She arrived at the Morrison at 8:55, taking the elevator to the rooftop where the city spread out in glittering lights below. The bar was elegant and exclusive, the kind of place where everyone looked wealthy and comfortable in their privilege. Nicole spotted Daniel immediately, standing by the glass railing overlooking the city, his dark suit perfect, his posture relaxed but commanding. He turned as she approached, and something flared in his pale eyes as they moved over her red dress. "Perfect," he said simply, taking her hand and leading her to a private corner table. A bottle of champagne was already waiting, expensive and cold. Nicole sat, feeling her pulse quicken as Daniel settled across from her. "You're upset I didn't call," he observed, pouring champagne into crystal flutes. "Not a question, but a statement of fact." "I thought maybe you'd changed your mind," Nicole admitted, hating how vulnerable the words sounded. "About what you said. About me being yours." Daniel's smile was slight and knowing. "I don't change my mind, Nicole. I gave you space to process, to decide if you were brave enough to pursue this. The fact that you're here, wearing a dress designed to devastate me, tells me you've made your choice." Nicole took a sip of champagne, the bubbles sharp and cold. "And what choice is that exactly?" "You've chosen to stop running from what you want," Daniel replied, his pale eyes holding hers. "You've chosen to explore this connection despite not understanding it, despite knowing I'm dangerous, despite every rational thought screaming that you should stay away. You've chosen me, Nicole. Now I'm going to show you what that means." He stood and offered his hand. "Dance with me." Nicole allowed herself to be led to the small dance floor where a few other couples swayed to soft jazz. Daniel pulled her close, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers against his chest. They moved together in silence, and Nicole felt the solid strength of him, the way he led with confident certainty, the way his hands splayed possessively across her lower back. As they danced, Daniel spoke quietly, his words meant only for her. "I need you to understand something, Nicole. I'm not a good man in the conventional sense. I've built my life in spaces between legality and morality, making choices that benefit me regardless of cost to others. I have enemies, people who would use anyone close to me as leverage. Being mine comes with risk, with exposure to darkness you've never experienced." He paused, his hand tightening at her waist. "But it also comes with absolute protection, with loyalty that's unshakable, with experiences and opportunities you can't imagine. I will challenge you, push you past your comfort zone, demand more from you than anyone ever has. In return, I will give you everything, Nicole, everything you want and things you don't yet know you need." Nicole looked up at him, seeing the truth in his face, the danger and the promise intertwined. "What if I can't handle it?" she whispered. "What if I'm not strong enough?" "Then you'll tell me, and we'll adjust," Daniel said simply. "I don't want you broken, Nicole. I want you transformed, elevated into the fullness of who you're capable of being. But that transformation requires trust, requires you to surrender control to someone who sees your potential." The word surrender sent a shiver through her. Fear and anticipation twisted together. "Can you do that, Nicole?" Daniel asked, his pale eyes searching hers. "Can you trust me enough to let go, to see where this takes us?" Nicole thought about her old life, the safe choices and comfortable limitations, the version of herself who accepted mediocrity and called it contentment. Then she thought about the woman in the red dress, dancing with a dangerous man on a rooftop overlooking the city, feeling more alive than she had in years. "Yes," she said, the word both surrender and declaration. "I trust you." Daniel's smile was slow and triumphant. "Then let's begin." He led her from the dance floor back to their table, but instead of sitting, he kept her hand in his, guiding her toward the elevator. "Where are we going?" Nicole asked, her pulse quickening. "Somewhere private," Daniel replied. "Somewhere I can show you exactly what being mine means." The elevator descended to the parking garage where Daniel's sedan waited. They drove in charged silence to a building Nicole didn't recognize, an older warehouse in the industrial district that had been converted into something else entirely. Daniel used a key card to access a private elevator, and they rode up in silence, his hand never leaving hers. The elevator opened directly into a penthouse apartment that took Nicole's breath away, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river, modern furniture that managed to be both minimalist and luxurious, artwork that looked museum quality. "This is where you live?" Nicole asked, taking in the space that reflected Daniel's taste perfectly, powerful and refined. "One of my residences," Daniel confirmed, "the one I use when I want complete privacy." He moved to a bar cart and poured amber liquid into 2 glasses, bringing one to Nicole. "Whiskey. Drink it slowly." Nicole sipped, the burn warming her from the inside. Daniel set his glass down and moved closer, his hands coming to rest on her hips. "I'm going to kiss you now, Nicole. And then I'm going to ask you a question, and I need you to answer honestly." He kissed her with the same devastating thoroughness as before, his mouth claiming hers while his hands held her steady, controlled strength in every touch. When he finally pulled back, Nicole was breathless, her body humming with want. "Do you want me?" Daniel asked, his voice low and rough. "Not as revenge against your ex? Not as rebellion against your safe life? Do you want me, Nicole? For myself? For who I am?" The question cut through every pretense, demanding truth. Nicole looked into his pale eyes and saw the intensity there, the barely controlled desire, the certainty that he already knew her answer. "Yes," she breathed. "I want you." "Then take what you want," Daniel commanded, his hands releasing her hips. "Show me you're brave enough to claim what's yours." Nicole understood the test, the challenge embedded in his words. He wanted her to choose actively, to take instead of being taken. She reached up and pulled his face down to hers, kissing him with all the hunger and fear and desperate want coursing through her veins. Daniel responded immediately, his control fracturing as he kissed her back with bruising intensity, his hands pulling her closer. They broke apart, breathing hard, and Daniel rested his forehead against hers. "You're mine now," he said, the words a promise and a warning. "No more running, no more pretending you want the safe path. You've chosen danger, chosen me, and I don't let go of what's mine." Nicole nodded, knowing she was agreeing to something that would change everything, that would transform her in ways she couldn't predict. But standing in Daniel's arms, feeling the intensity of his desire and possession, she couldn't find it in herself to care about consequences. She had asked a stranger to kiss her to make her ex-boyfriend jealous, and instead, she had found something real and dangerous and consuming. She had found a man who saw her hunger and fed it, who challenged her to be more than the safe, ordinary version of herself she had accepted for too long. The girl who walked into Marcello's seeking petty revenge was gone, replaced by a woman brave enough to claim what she wanted, strong enough to surrender to someone worthy of that trust. Daniel kissed her again, slower this time, thorough and possessive, marking her as his in ways that went far beyond the physical. And Nicole kissed him back, accepting the claim, embracing the transformation, choosing danger over safety and discovering that sometimes the most reckless decisions lead to the most profound truths. She had begged a Mafia boss to kiss her, and he had answered with possession and promise. Now she would discover what it meant to belong to a man like Daniel Cross, what it cost and what it gave, and whether she had the strength to thrive in the darkness instead of merely surviving it. But standing in his arms, feeling the certainty of his claim and the intensity of her own desire, Nicole knew one truth with absolute clarity. She was his. And terrifying as that was, it was also exactly what she needed, what she had been seeking without knowing, what would finally make her feel fully, devastatingly alive.